And that next step, of course, will also be Michael Cohen and his testimony, connecting all the dots potentially for the prosecution. And the defense is just waiting to tear him apart based on his background and history as well. And, what's interesting, just pivoting a little bit, comparing this case and how the judge has handled the violations of the gag order by former President Trump. Right now, we're at 10 violations, and he was held in contempt. But this was a limited gag order. The judge already has assessed him $1,000 per violation for the 9 violations previously. And he just said to Trump, to former President Trump, the last thing I want to do is to put you in jail, implying that he would. How how true do you think that is? What do you think the effect of that would be? And do you think this was a necessary statement by the judge to show that he means business in this case after continued violations?
Judge Merchant has a difficult job. He needs to put on a fair trial. That's his number one prerogative. And he straight came out and said that former President Trump is undermining the rule of law by coming out and talking about potential witnesses, jurors, about the case itself, about the judge himself. I ultimately believe that this judge does not want to put former President Trump in jail because it could add more fodder to the idea that, in the narrative that's out there in a lot of the media, that this is a baseless case. This is a witch hunt. They're looking for any reason to put former President Trump in jail. And look, they can't even let this guy talk about his own case. And it's a violation of his First Amendment rights. I don't think that Judge Merchant wants that type of circus, but he needs to balance that against keeping an orderly courtroom, keeping the trial fair, just, and upholding the law. He's in a difficult situation. I would be surprised if he went all the way to put former President Trump in jail in contempt, even if it's just for a night or whatever it may be, because it does add a different dynamic to this trial, which is already getting, here we are talking about it, it's getting tons and tons of breathless media coverage about what's going on with it. It would only add to that, and it might take away from the appearance of a fair and straightforward and direct trial, which is what the judge wants to maintain.
Yeah, it's difficult to maintain the courtroom and rule of law, and when you have one of the highest profile defendants ever in your court, and with the type of back and forth that happens between supporters versus antagonists. So we'll see what the judge does. It's a difficult balance. How do you feel like Judge Merchan has done compared to the previous judges in recent cases? Judge Erdogan comes to mind, where there was a lot of battles directly between the judge and President Trump, and he also issued a number of contempt orders and violations of the gag order, but it was difficult to suppress Trump's viewpoints.
I think Judge Merchant is in a position that's a little bit different than the civil cases because this is a criminal trial. This could ultimately result in jail time. This is about, life and liberty, right? This is about former President Trump, whether he's going to be able to walk a free man or whether he's going to be in Rikers. So that's what's at stake here. And I think it's pretty tight for him and more difficult, I think, is a better way to describe it. Whereas in a civil case, the only thing that can really happen are injunctions, stopping businesses from operating, civil penalties, fines. It's all monetary. This is different. This is about individual liberty is what's at stake. So that's why I think to some extent, Judge Merchant has been willing to kind of let former President Trump attack in a lot of different ways, but I think he's narrowing in on trying to maintain some civility and trying to wrangle his courtroom back under his control. I think that overall, he has a difficult task at hand with a difficult defendant, but he does seem to be handling it the best he can. And today was a good example when Miss Daniels was on the stand and going into really deep detail about the alleged sexual encounter with former President Trump. He literally steps in and says, what's the relevance of this? Can we keep this more narrow? I don't believe the jury needs to hear that. So he's really locked into this case. He's following it very closely, and he wants to limit the amount of potential appealable issues. He wants to limit any external factors that would affect this case and take away from what he hopes to be just a jury verdict, whether that's guilty, whether that's not guilty. All that Judge Mercer wants to do is help the defense and the prosecution usher in the evidence that needs to be ushered in, have the witnesses testify that need to testify, do the openings, do the closings, rule on any motions, and just sort of like land this ship, right? Land it in the jury's hands with everything that they need. So he's sort of the caretaker of making that happen, or I should say is the caretaker of making that happen. And that's why, he has a very difficult job, but seems to be upholding it. Here we are at day 12, and nothing too awry has occurred.
Yeah, he's doing a pretty good job of trying to, as you said, that was a good way to put it, to try to land the ship and have as fair and balanced a trial as possible.